Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Applying Middot Practice to Intra-Communal Conflict. It's being given by Rabbi Marc Margolius. Rabbi Margolius directs the alumni programs for the Institute for Spirituality, a center for the cultivation of Jewish contemplative practices among rabbis, cantors, educators, and lay leaders. He also directs the Tikkun Middot Project for the Institute, an initiative in which mindfulness and Middot practices are being integrated systematically into 27 Jewish communities led by Institute alumni. He is spiritual leader of the West End Synagogue, a Reconstructionist Congregation on Manhattan's Upper West Side, since 2010. As spiritual leader of the Congregation Beth Am Israel in Penn Valley, Pennsylvania, from 1989 through 2003, Rabbi Margolius helped develop a national model for the synagogue as a Shabbat-centered community constructed around intergenerational learning. Ordained in 1989 at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, Rabbi Margolius graduated from Yale College and Yale University. Everybody, please welcome Rabbi Margolius, and I will turn this over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you much. Thank you. I hope people can hear me well. First of all, Shavua Tov, everyone, and Chag Sameach. It's a big time of the Jewish year right now, and appreciate people making time to learn together. And I know this is being recorded, so people will be participating at a later date as well. So anyway, it's a big honor for me to be with you, to share some of my own experience, and as much as possible, actually, I'd like for this to be as interactive, even though I know everyone is muted. I hope everyone knows that you can, if you have a comment or a question or anything you want to interject, that you can type that in the chat box, which is on the bottom right corner of the screen. And I hope people will feel free to do that. Any associations you have, any questions you have, and I will try to respond to those along. I'll also take a break sometimes to encourage people to type that in so that we can be as interactive as possible, because I know it's hard to stay focused on a web when it isn't a little bit interactive. So I'm going to jump right into it. The topic is applying Middot practice to intercommunal conflict, and frankly I don't remember exactly when that topic was determined when I signed up for it, but as it turned out, I've been dealing with a very intense conflict in my own community, my own congregation this year, and so this process of preparing this web has been extremely helpful for me. And what I do, if possible, is to think about a conflict in your own community, whether it's your congregation, the community in which you live, national, whatever community you want to associate with. Think about a particular conflict that your community is dealing with now, and may try to see this presentation through that lens. And if possible, share some awareness, some insights, some thoughts about how this might apply to your own situation. That would be helpful. Now, as was said, I work, I'm both a congregational rabbi, and I also work in the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, which is devoted to transmitting a mindfulness approach to Judaism in a number of different ways, one of which is through this Tikkun Middot Project. And it means combining mindfulness practice, paying attention, simple attention to what's happening in the moment, with as little judgment as possible, or with trying to suspend judgment, and then using a range of Middot to be able to identify options that we have for responding to situations in which we find ourselves. So I'm going to go to a PowerPoint presentation, and what we're going to do today is I'll go through the PowerPoint and use it as our guide, but we're going to do some text study as well as part of the webinar. So oops, on page, let's go back. So, okay. So first of all, question, there we go. Have to do simply with the recognition of conflict and how we typically react to it, or what it engenders in us. what actions and thoughts are generated by conflict. And because we are diverse human beings, we have different is hardwired by our own experience, by our own genetics, by our own experience, how we, what is generated within us by the experience of being in conflict with others or being in a context in which there is conflict. I'll be up front and say that I know from my own experience that I am a person who's not comfortable with conflict. I can be avoidant of conflict. I can try to repress conflict. I can try to run away from conflict. I don't conflict. And there are others I know who actually are quite energized by it. So I just listed here, for the sake of starting things off, some emotions, some of the feelings that are generated by being in a situation of conflict, which include anger, fear, pain, sadness, and grief. For some people, excitement and passion. Some people are drawn to conflict. They throw themselves into it. They thrive in situations of conflict. It's their way of being. Each of us, for our own unique reasons, has our own response to that. And I invite you, if you are thinking about any other emotion or feeling that you identify, shame. I see is Henri Vogel. Shame, I think, could be part of that list. Any other emotions that you can think of, feel free to jot them down. I'm going to end this PowerPoint with some feedback, so I appreciate your help in doing that. So those are some of the emotions, and part of the process for us is, first of all, try to cultivate some self-awareness about what is our habitual reaction when confronting conflict, when we're in a context of conflict. Righteous indignation, I put that as that's a good subset of anger. Indignation, I like that. So feel free, keep spitballing there. That would be great. So these are the emotions, and righteous indignation kind of segues into thoughts that are generated by conflict. The kind of the tapes that start playing in our head when we're facing conflict. Particularly since we're focusing on communal conflict, not just interpersonal conflict. We're in a community that we are part of, or which we identify, is in conflict. What are some of the thoughts that that come up, that might arise in the mind that we might notice? Borstein, one of my teachers, used to speak about, or other meditating teachers speak about, the tapes that start playing. You hit the button, tape number 3, like a narrative that comes up. So thoughts that I suggested that come up, that this isn't for me anymore. I don't belong. People don't understand me. I'm not understood. There may be change, and things will not be the same. Things will be different. Another might be, I can't trust these people. I thought I could trust them, but I can't. I invite you to jot box any sign that comes up in a situation of conflict. You're saying competition. It's interesting. Some people flee from competition, and some people are really drawn to competition. People might just feel adrenaline start flowing, and they thrive on adrenaline. They might be something that generates a lot of energy in them. Competition can be one of those things. So competition is a situation that's actually quite helpful here. It's a competition. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Will there be winners? Will there be losers? Will there be a winner? Create a certain framework for thinking about things in which there are winners, losers, or a hierarchy. Gold, silver, bronze. It's going to turn out. And so I'd like to bookmark that and keep that in mind. So another, trying to separate out the emotions, the emotional reactions we have in conflict situations, and thoughts that are generated when we're in a situation like that. Okay, so for example, it told me this week that they had the fight of their 30-year friendship with somebody as a result of the intra-communal conflict that we're engaged in right now, would raise questions about the fundamental friendship. What's wrong with these people? Love that. There's something, like that very much, Jeremy. Thanks. Okay. Let me guess. Those conflict-generated emotions and thoughts whirling around fear, particularly fear of potential loss associated with this conflict. Number one is simply not going to happen. There's conflict, things flux, unknown what the result is going to be, and part of going on is I'm not in control of this. So there's fear of the loss of control. Some of those thoughts that I shared in the slide have to do with not being understood, not being recognized, not being seen, going to matter. So the fear of the loss of self in relationship to the community. And there's also the fear of the loss of connection that has existed up till now. Will I be estranged? Will I feel rejected? Will I feel part of this anymore? So too, I'd like to invite you to share any you think give rise to those feelings and thoughts around conflict. And these are the three that occur to me most readily. Maybe they're the ones that I identify with most readily, but I might have others. In other words, there are a bunch of different emotions, including the righteous indignation, anger, sadness, grief, all those. But underlying many of those, I think, is the emotion of fear. And the question is, well, what's the fear of conflict? And I'm trying to identify what's the fear specifically related to, and is it true? Is it true that these things will happen, or how do I? Is it true that I don't have the resources to cope with these particular potential losses? So, again, free to jot down thoughts, questions in the chat box, but I'm going to transition here to intra-communal conflicts and how the conflict might be transformed into something positive. I saw in the tagline for the Mussar Institute, I guess we'll go back to it for a second. Yeah, awareness. So we were suggesting we start with, it was just awareness of the situation of conflict, and then wisdom, and then transformation. So go back to the slide. What to do is think about how can we use a situation of conflict to understand it as a situation in which individually and collectively the community as a whole experience itself as transformed by conflict as opposed to survive it. Conflict that my community is involved in, I know it's very easy to feel as though we're just trying to navigate through difficult waters to get through it. However, I do think that, and in many ways, people might like, boy, I wish it hadn't happened. I wish we didn't have this conflict. Think better before we have to deal with this conflict. And it's certainly the way I feel to the time. I think that at its best, this does offer an opportunity for individual members of the community and the community itself to be transformed so it actually grows in ways that would have been impossible without the conflict. Let's take a look at this passage in one of my favorite passages in the Torah, is the reunification scene between Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau, Jacob's 20-year exile from his estranged it's a long story here. Both backstory about what happened, which gave rise to the conflict between the brothers. Last we knew involved Esau, his brother, perhaps with justification, and then taking off, going back to the homeland for 20 years, getting married to Rachel and Leah, having children with them and with Bilhah and Zilpah, and then just make a decision to come home to encounter his brother Esau. So just at the beginning of chapter 33 of Exodus, right? That should be Genesis. Genesis 33, verses 1 through 10. I'm going to scroll a bit. Okay. So in this passage, what I invite you to do is identify particular midot that are exemplified by both Jacob and Esav, from which we might learn about we could develop a paradigm for fixing, transcending, or transforming conflict. Now, first of all, the passage begins with Yaakov lifting his eyes and looking, and the Hebrew phrase is "Vayisa Yaakov einav vayar v'hineh." Now, this is a phrase that recurs throughout Genesis, the Genesis narratives, beginning with Abraham. Three-part phrase: Vayisa einav, he lifted his eyes, Yar, and he saw, v'hineh, and behold. This happens to Abraham when he's sitting at the entrance of his tent and sees the strangers passing by in this key moment early in the Torah. But here, this is Jacob on his way back home. And what does he see? Esau coming towards him with 400 men. So Jacob, in conflict, divides the children among his wives, Leah and Rachel, and handmaids Bilhah and Zilpah, and he orders them and puts the Bilhah and Zilpah and their kids first, Leah, the less loved wife, and her children after, and Rachel and her son Joseph, his beloved Joseph, at the rear in the most protected position. And then he passes over all of them and bows to the ground 7 times, ad achiv, until near to his brother. This is where I see people are jotting down some of the meat that you might be looking at this passage through the lens of Mussar. What do you notice? Okay, so this approach, ad gishto ad achiv, gishto is comes from a verb which really relates to coming close. By yigash is the parsha in which Judah later approaches Joseph, and that's certainly another passage we could look at in terms of reconciliation or resolution of conflict. He runs to meet him, embraces him, falls on his neck, kisses him, and they weep. And here it's Esau who lifts his eyes and sees. Vayisa et einav vayar. He sees, and there's no hineh there, v'hineh. Says, who are these with you? Jacob says, these are the children with whom God has graced servant. Asher Hanan Elohim et Avdecha. So again, inviting you to note any midot that you're seeing there. Then the handmaids with their children. Oops. The handmaids came with their children and bowed down. With kittens. And then approach and bow. Joseph and Rachel approach and bow. And Jacob says, what is the meaning of all this camp which I met? And Jacob responds, to favor in the sight of my master or my Lord. Esau says, Yeli Rav Achi, I have plenty. Yacha Asher Lach. Let yours be yours. So I invite you, for those familiar with Midot, to see if you can identify what Midot are in pleasure. And then Jacob says, no, no, okay, I found favor in your sight, receive offering from my hand. And then one of my favorite lines in the whole Torah, your face is like seeing the face of God. You were pleased with me, and you have appeased me. So these are great. I see humility, anah, kavod, chesed, loving kindness, I'm assuming, there, nivut, generosity, and mechila, forgiveness, slicha. Excellent. Okay. So let's do the PowerPoint for a second. Here's a list, and it overlaps with much of what you find there. First of all, Hitlamdut, which is the prerequisite to all the Midot. Hitlamdut, as in our particular project, the way we define Hitlamdut is as essentially as mindfulness practice. That is, investigation of what is going on in the moment, and as much as possible, suspending the judgment, lift and seeing. That's the Yisa Einav, he lifted his eyes, Vayar, and he saw, seeing the truth of what's going on in the moment, and through reality the other. For example, when Jacob raises his eyes and sees, he sees 400 people coming to him. Now, often that is interpreted as he's alone, he sees 400 men coming with Esav, and he forms a judgment that, oh, this is a hostile group coming towards me. However, if you judgment, you really have no idea. 400, it could be a large welcoming group of 400. It could be a parade, ticket parade to welcome him home. He doesn't know, and he's investigating. Same with Esav. They know from a distance of what each is bringing. And so one element in the story, I think, that each of them exhibit the willingness to not prejudge or not act in the moment based on what is or what they've experienced in the past. They're not bound by that. They're freed of that in the moment to say, what is happening here? What's going on with it? I don't know here with this, but okay, thank you. So that's one. As you probably know, Hitlamdut is not a midah per se. It's a stance towards the world, which we catch ourselves saying, "Wow, I'm really I'm carrying all the baggage and all my prejudgment and all my experience with me to experience. Let me try to set that aside so I can be present in this moment and open to all possibilities." Where the mindfulness comes into play to say, I notice that I am bringing all my past with me, but what I want to strive to do is be really present in the moment and to let go of that judgment. And I think Jacob and Esav exhibit that in this moment. Others, many of the midot that you mentioned, anava, people mentioned humility. Let's see here as well. There's zut, enthusiasm, harat hatov, gratitude. We have anava, which is exhibited both by, I think, both by Yaakov, who is aware of being blessed from beyond and without, and also each of them is conscious of some way of the boundary between the self and the other. And this exhibited even more in the passage afterwards, where Esav thinks he, offers to go with Jacob offers to go with Esav, but winds up going in a different direction. The boundary between the two of them are preserved, conscious of what is, whose space is whose space. Skip bitachon for a second, but some of these others are kavod, in the process of coming close and witnessing the divine in the other, particularly at the end where Jacob, who has just wrestled this night with this anonymous stranger, knows who it is. There's all these different theories about who the anonymous stranger was, an angel, God himself, Esav, a number of possibilities. But he sees the divine in Esav, his brother, certainly a major transformation in his way of seeing his brother. That is the definition of kavod, to see and witness the divine, the in value of the other. Middot, generosity, material generosity and emotional generosity, the benefit of the doubt to the other. I will also add here bitachon, in the case of particularly of Jacob. He does not know how this is going to turn out. Many precautions, of course. He tries to control the outcome. He sends presents. He sends messages to his brother. He takes precautions. But ultimately, he doesn't have control how this is going to work out, and he steps forward and steps in front of his family to face his brother, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. To me, there's a tremendous amount of bitachon in that, of trust. And finally, gevura, that is boundaries, strength and boundaries. That even though they come together, they recognize the differences, they recognize the boundaries between each other, and those are there as well. Okay. So they run toward each other, and Esav really does say, I have plenty. I am satisfied. I am sameach b'chelki. Happy with what I've got. I need no more. I need more. Yesh li rav. I have plenty. Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're going to go back. Those are some of the midot that I think that are critical for people to attend to in entering into a situation of intracommunal conflict. Of course, many others as well, but I think those are core midot that we can glean from that passage of Ben Asa and Esau and apply them. Now, I'm going to turn to a passage from the Mishnah that I'm assuming many of you have seen. This is now a text sheet, much of which is derived from texts which were produced by Rabbi Roth of Pardoner for Judaism and Conflict Resolution that were produced for the 9th of Adar, for the Day of Constructive Conflict. So I know there was a previous webinar about that. So for some of you, this might be a little bit of a review, but I've tried to summarize it in a way here that I think might be helpful for thinking about how to frame intercommunal conflict in a way that will maximize the possibility that it could be transformational for the community engaged in that conflict. Excuse me. Based on this passage from Pirkei Avot, from Mishnah Avot, 5, the 17th Mishnah, which says that Kol MACHLOKET shehi l'shem SHAMAYIM sofa hitkayem. Every MACHLOKET, every disputation, conflict, controversy, that l'shem SHAMAYIM, for the sake of heaven, will continue to exist, will be established, lehitkayem. She'enam l'shem SHAMAYIM ein sofa lehitkayem. But one not for the sake of heaven will not continue to exist. And then the Mishnah asks the question, well, what is a kind of machloket that is l'shem SHAMAYIM? And they say it was the disputations between Hillel and Shammai, the classic cases. So the question is, if you have conflict in a community, one that will, in the Mishnah terms, continue to exist, and I think it means that in a good way. Stand. You might say even then the Lehit Kayem is referring to not the Machloka, not the conflict, community. What kind of conflict that a community will be able to live through, survive, and even thrive? Let's frame it that way. And there are essentially 4 fundamental responses to what does it mean what will continue to exist in a controversy that is L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of heaven, according to various commentaries on this passage. So number one is that the community itself will be preserved. That will continue to exist. The community will exist, and this is based on, I think, particularly two midot, not related to, but particularly two midot: kavod, honor or respect, and bayit, the provision and nurturing of direct relationship. The midah, which basically requires us to look beyond ourselves and to see the whole as primary. Mussar, much of the focus is on the interests of the other and using that as a way of helping to negate and free ourselves the Yetzer Hara that's associated with the ego. We can do the same thing with the community by saying that, what's really at stake here is not self-interest. It's not my particular viewpoint. It's the good of the community. That's what's most important here. And I will say that as the rabbi of a community that is engaged in intra-communal conflict, that it's easier in some ways for me, rather than being just a member of the community, but as somebody who is has to understand myself as a steward for the community as a whole, to focus on that particular midah of shalom bayit as an important principle. Okay, so there are three commentaries here on that Mishnah that interpret it in this way. The Bartanura, by Ovadia Bartanura, who was an Italian commentator on the Mishnah, who lived in Italy, that every controversy that is for the sake of heaven, L'Shem Shamayim, the end will continue to exist. This means that the people of controversy are going to exist and not be destroyed. It's going to continue to exist, L'Hit Kayem, the people who are involved, as with the dispute between Hillel and Shammai, that were not destroyed. They were destroyed, nor their students were destroyed. Hillel and Shammai continue to exist, and their schools continue to exist. They didn't destroy each other. The Tosefta on Yevamot says that even though these would forbid and those would permit, they did refer, that is, speaking about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, they did stop eating together. They still kept having Kiddush lunch together. They went out to dinner together. They still invited each other over for meals. To that which is written, all the ways of a person are clean in their own eyes, but the Holy One weighs the spirits. And also on Yevamot, in the Talmud, although Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are in disagreement on the questions, on fundamental questions of personal status, still Shammai did not abstain from marrying women of the families of Beit Hillel, nor did Beit Hillel refrain from marrying those of Beit Shammai. This is to teach that they showed love and friendship towards one another, thus putting into practice the scriptural text, truth, and so they stood their ground about their views about what was the correct position, the policy for the community. However, their love for peace, or for shalom, I'd say for shalom bayit, was an equally important consideration for them. That the commitment to their position did not outweigh and did not justify the destruction of the community. So that's a very important principle for every member of community to bear in mind, that no matter how strongly they feel about a particular position, they need to bring into the mix of midah of shalom bayit, which means to see the whole house and to themselves as responsible for the whole house, and even to put that needs of the whole house ahead, perhaps, of their own views. Second page of that. Another interpretation of the word Hit Kayem, what will continue to be established, is that the truth of the matter, the seeking after the truth is what's going to continue to exist. That is, that the topic of disputation is going to continue to exist, And commentator on that passage in Pirkei Avot, Lev Avot, a commentary, 16th century, said the author of the Mishnah states that disagreement is for the sake of heaven, and the intentions of the disputants are such that through the disagreement, the truth should be clarified. That is a light which would not have happened otherwise. So that I have my position, I have my view, but the only way I know if my view has any merit is if I will be engaged in a disputation which will challenge it. And I trust, and I might add here the bitachon, I trust that in engaging in dispute and conflict and respectful dialogue and disagreement, that the underlying truth is going to emerge out of that process. Certainly, the end of the disagreement will continue to exist by virtue of the fact that the truth continues to exist. So, seek truth. So the midot, or the qualities that I associated with that particular approach is, again, hitlamdut, or curiosity, avoiding prejudging. That is saying, I have my view, but I'm going to remain open. I'm going to remain open to being proven wrong or adapting my views. And really what I'm after here, and this is directly to a Mussar approach to this, is I have to stay aware of how much I attach to my ego in maintaining my position. I don't want to be embarrassed. I do not want to be wrong. I want to be right. Such in competition earlier, I win this. I don't want to be a loser, because I do, I might experience shame in some way. So all this has to do with being, first of all, recognizing that inclination, and to some extent setting it aside and saying, what really matters is getting to what is true here. Jeremy, I appreciate what you wrote there. Jeremy Schwartz wrote, I'm sometimes gone in an unproductive direction in terms of the communal continuity, because I worry the other side is going to destroy the community. I need to want the other side to continue. And this is difficult, I think. So here, the challenge for the leadership of the community is to elevate the need of the community as a whole, value the community as a whole, to continue. So that was point number one. So this, we've covered point number two. Number three is of two things. What will continue to exist? What will continue to exist is that there will be a resolution in which I will admit that I've been convinced of the validity of the other views, or I have become convinced that there's some truth in what I've got to say, and some truth in what the other party has to say. So here's two commentaries on the first view, and both of these, I think, have to do with the practice of anava, of being open to being wrong, or to open to both being right. This commentary, which is an 18th century German commentary in Lavan on Mishnah Avot, says, since their disagreements were for attaining the truth, therefore when the truth became known, they would not continue to insist on their opinion, and they would accept and enjoy the correct opinion that became clarified. Because one said they did not intend to disagree other for the sake of heaven. The sake of heaven means wanted to get to the truth. You want truth, and so they said, well, your point well taken. I guess I'll view you. Elsewhere in the Mishnah, there is this passage in Eduyot which basically is about the preservation of multiple opinions and of changing opinions. Shammai said and Hillel said. The sage said, not like the words of this, but like the words of this. Shammai and Hillel said, sage said, not like the words of this one, but like the words of this one. And Shammai said, the sage not like the words of this one, and not the words of that one. Why do they record the opinions of Shammai and Hillel when these not prevail? In other words, sometimes Shammai wins, sometimes Hillel wins, sometimes either win. All the opinions are included. And why this? To teach generations that come after that none should persist in his opinions, Well, the fathers of the world did not persist in their opinion, because there are times when people's opinions, these matters that Beit Hillel reverted to rule in accordance to the words of Beit Shammai. In other words, shifted positions. All opinions were preserved and respected. So I throw kavod as well in there as a midah. Honoring, even if one disagrees with an opinion, honoring the opinion and preserving the opinion. Of course, we see this in constitutional law. The dissents are always preserved because one day the dissent might be the majority opinion, recorded and respected. That's being willing to admit that one is wrong and being convinced by the other. And under the, we've got two opinions, we do with not so black and white. So back to the metaphor of competition. In competition, we often think it's win makes all, or it's black and white, or it's or lose, or it's a zero-sum game. But that's not the way it necessarily has to go down. It is possible that there is some validity in more than one winner, or more than one partial winner. So again, a vote on that Mishnah says it's impossible to explain that the opinion, what's going to continue to exist? The opinion of both will continue to exist. The one forbids, the one who permits, because both are the words of the living God. And the classic passage in the Talmud in Eruvin 13b, where Rabbi Abba said in the name of Shmuel, for 3 years Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel argued. One side said the halakha is like us, the other said the halakha is like us. They were in this conflict, and suddenly there was a bat call. There was a voice from heaven that called out, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. So that's referenced in the Magen Avot. That's the last commentary there that says that what is a MACHLOKET l'shem SHAMAYIM, in which the validity, the truth, the wisdom inherent in different opinions, in the diversity of opinions, stand is recognized side by side. Even they seem totally contradictory. One forbids and one allows. There is a value in that. So we get a whole matrix of dote and approach, which potentially can shift our to intracommunal conflict. Go back here. Let's see. So one more. Sorry. One next. Give you the comments in the chat box. Here is the second half of that Talmud passage from Eruvin. We read the part about how Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai were in conflict for 3 years, and with this bat call that said, these and these, Elu ve'elu, are the words of the living God. But the conclusion was, Beit Hillel, but the law follows Beit Hillel. So always just a classic passage from the Talmud that says that you have believed both sides, but follow one view. And why that? The Talmud asks, since both are the words of the living God, what entitled Beit Hillel to have the law fixed according to their views? Is the quality, when we dote, of Beit Hillel that are determinative of following this path. And the Talmud says, and I made the text a little bit bigger. Mipnei shenochim va'aluvim hayu b'shemim divreihem v'divrei Beit Shammai. V'lod ela shemakdinim divrei Beit Shammai v'divreihem. It says, the Talmud says, why? Because Beit Hillel and here the word is nochin, which could mean at ease. And I really I would like to dig into that a little bit, because I think it plays into the mindfulness. That is that in the middle of the conflict, the Hillel exhibited a quality of not being only agitated by being in the conflict. They were to see the whole. They were to be mindful. They were to perspective. They were a place where the Yetzer HaTov could be at work. And the second word is aluvin, which is not, it's usually translated as humble in the translations of this passage of the Talmud, but in many ways, it's a stronger word than that. They were submissive. They subordinated themselves. They subordinated their ego. They a form of anava, a form of humility, but it's a strong. I would suggest that it's even a little bit stronger than that. That day, Hillel, where people had perspective and said, you know what? Here's what they did. They studied both their own views and the views of Beit Shammai. They studied both. Below, but even more so, divrei Beit Shammai, divrei hem. They instanced the words of Beit Shammai before their own. They taught the teachings of Beit Shammai before their own as an act of humility. Now, this, I think, is something that's very quite critical in dealing with intra-communal conflict. So below this, you'll see I have suggested beginnings, and I have to say that this is a work in progress, of a late Hillel method for processing intra-communal conflict. What do we learn from Hillel? First, Hillel is going to be a character at our Seder's Friday night and Saturday night. We eat his sandwich. So it might not be a bad opportunity to bring this to your Seder. What is the Hillel method? What are the Middot? What are the qualities that Hillel brings to the table in doing this? So I mentioned all of these: Hiplam Dut, being curious, system judgment, honoring the sanctity of each person and every opinion. Risking difference, that is, not insisting on unanimity or a monolithic approach. Anava, as we know, is a quality that has to do with not taking up more than having our own place, but not taking up too much space, as alumni teaches. And so it has to do with saying, okay, that's you. You're entitled to your view. I think that completely. In the process of engaging with in this way, modeling that by speaking from the I, that is speaking from my own place, my own makom, and I'm not purporting to speak for your place. Staying in and honoring one's own place and views, to be convinced of the merit of others' views. That is that okay, and you're in your place, and your view, and I need to hear what you have to say. Seeing validity and truth in one's own views and in the views of others. Being aware of the process of being engaged in conflict energizes the ego. Because it's this fear that I'm going to be lost, I'm not going to be seen, I'm not going to be understood, I'm going to be dismissed, I'm going to lose my community, I can't trust anybody. All that, of course, gives tremendous energy to the ego needs of people involved in conflict. And all more so, it's important for people to be aware of that and to do their best, because nobody could do this perfectly, to observe our internal motivations. Our desire to be right, our desire to win the competition, and to say, you know what really this is about seeing what is true, what is best community, rather than what affirms my own ego. Beat is a big one too. As I said, a lot of people, including myself, would say, boy, I'd rather not do this at all. But if in some way we believe that engaging in the process of moving through conflict actually will transform us and will transform the community, that is active bitachon. That's trusting that process. It may be cliche to trust the that phrase, trust the process. By trusting the process to work on us, to transform us, is another midah which we haven't mentioned, which is really a midah that at least in the work that I use, is about trustworthy, showing up for the process and not opting out. And so very easy for people to say, look, it's going to be my way or the highway. I'm going to check out, or it doesn't look like things are going my way. I'm going to shop around for another community. This requires that people say, I'm going to show up, I'm going to engage in this process, and I'll If I have to make a decision at some point about leaving, I will make a decision, but I am fully present, I'm committed to achieving this process, even if it looks like I might lose right now. And then perhaps the most important of all is the concept of shalom bayit, which is not papering over disagreement. It has to do with seeing the whole and the good of the whole in ways as primary, certainly more important than my own personal view. Any questions, thoughts on that? Looking down at the corner. Just going to flip through here because we just have a few more minutes. Through these slides, which are Middot that I just cataloged, Middot that I think are necessary for this Beit Hillel role, and now some practical suggestions for how a community might engage in this process. So, too much conflict avoidance. This is, and this is where the transformation possibilities, I think, are really quite tremendous. Because I don't know what percentage of people categorize themselves as conflict avoidant versus, people who charge into conflict. My experience is that it seems to me that most people are conflict avoidant. That this is really a great opportunity for people to get willing, and I think Emunah really is about that, to say, I'm going to show up, and Emunah, I'm going to trust this process. I'm not comfortable with this. This inspires discomfort in me. It makes me want to flee. I'm going to just simply notice that desire to flee. I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to dig down into it, and I'm going to stay where I am. I'm in a relationship in some way. Okay, here are some suggestions for something that we're going to experiment with. I had not until now called a Hillel group, which is an exercise for people to practice the methodology of Beit Hillel. That is, to study opinions, study one's own opinions, study the opinions of the others, advance all opinions on the MACHLOKET, on the dispute, the conflict, and then to ask people to identify the opinion with which they most strongly disagree, and to identify the values, views, and concerns of that opinion with which they identify or they consider valid. So if they can see in the views of, see the validity, and identify with, in some degree, a view with which they most strongly disagree. And then in a small group, so over all these Middot, to review those Middot together, to have a mindfulness or meditation period for people to digest, to sit down, and then in a small group, a facilitated small group, give a person the opportunity to speak about that opinion with which they disagree. In other words, to teach the view with which they disagree, that they understand it from the inside, and to the greatest degree possible to encourage them to empathize with that opinion by describing the views or concerns behind that opinion, which either they identify or which they understand perhaps as valid. Now, in small groups, they're not for aging so much, they're for simply having the experience of practicing, expressing, and teaching the views of the other. And to do the same thing, except this time with the views of the opinion with which they agree. And then, and this doesn't necessarily all have to happen in the same small group. Maybe over a period of time, to invite people in the process of investigating this conflict to imagine a possible outcome of the conflict, which will address, not resolve, but address all the concerns and values expressed in the opinions. And then ask this question: is there a shalom bayit outcome? Is the outcome to the conflict which is for or agreeable to the broadest part of the community? Something that you might just this as a consensus. but some of that is an outcome that is in the best interest of the community as a whole, and one in which there is an absolute winner and loser, a majority and minority, though that might be the way it has to go. It all depends on the conflict. So, again, a work in progress, but I think we need mechanisms which, first of all, people are that their engagement around a conflict is going to be informed by knowledge of and practice of certain core midot, which are essential to the conflict be an opportunity of transformation rather than just implosion or explosion of the community. Precedes engaging in the actual content of the conflict. And finding a mechanism, a process mechanism like these Hillel groups, small groups, which will encourage people to step out of their own opinions, their own positions, their own selves into a position of empathy, particularly following the model of Beit Hillel, taking and prioritizing the views of others before their own. And all this is based on, I think, on a rabbinic model of disputation, which from not only we, in our own small communities, but certainly, I would dare say, for this country as a whole, there's a lot of wisdom, certainly a lot of wisdom here that we need, that we derive not from the Mussar tradition, but from rabbinic tradition as well. So I'm going to do there. I know we have about 3 minutes to see if there are any questions. You're the only Mussarist in the room. That's a good question. Well, I think that the contribution for people who have been exposed to these materials, who understand this approach, one is that is to offer this, try to offer this to the leadership of the community, so that it will, I think it has to take root in the fabric of the community in some way. It has to be familiar to people so that people have, at the very least, they have the vocabulary, let alone understand what it is. But otherwise, really, the best I think one can do is model this model for others, and to label label our own process and say, educate through our own example. That's probably the best you could do. Let's see. Any questions? I think the time, so I'm going to.
Yes, this is Jeff Agron with the Mussar Institute, and thank you very much, Rabbi, for a wonderful webinar before Pesach for everybody, and we greatly appreciate it. The link to the webinar and slides will be sent out by tomorrow to everyone. We had quite a few people sign up who were not able to be on live, but will watch the recording. And I'd like to thank Evan for being our host this morning, and thank Dahlia Brill for being the organizer and producer of this webinar series, which has been wonderful. It started in January, and we have, I believe, 2 more remaining before the summer. So if there's no more questions, then I will wish everybody and a number of people are chiming in saying what a great webinar it was. So Pesach from Amsterdam. So we have people all over the world watching with us. So
Wow.
Thank you very much, and wishing everybody a wonderful day. And
Thank you all. Chag Sameach to everyone. Appreciate this honor. Thank you.
thank you, Evan.